Hello everyone, it's Dr. Ruth Dotton here. I'm a board certified adult psychiatrist who uses metabolic and lifestyle interventions to get at the root causes of mental illness. So today we're going to be talking about the keto-adaptation period, or otherwise known as the keto flu. And that's that period in the first 2 to 4 weeks as you're adapting from carb burning mode to ketone burning mode. So what is it? What causes it? Can I avoid it? And then, of course, there are some special considerations that we have to think about if we're using ketogenic therapy to treat particularly a mental health condition. Okay, so before we get started, again, this is not medical advice. We're not establishing a doctor-patient relationship. And if you're at all considering implementing ketogenic therapy for yourself as a mental health treatment, please talk with your medical and mental health providers to see if this might be something that's right for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. So the keto adaptation period, like I said, it's that 2 to 4 week period during which your body is transitioning from burning carbs to burning fat. And depending on that individual and their prior diet and metabolic health, it can take anywhere from 2 days to a full week to get into ketosis. So meaning that your ketone meter is starting to measure 0.5 or higher. But it will take several weeks for your body to really fully adapt to getting into ketosis. And it may even take longer, like the longer you're in ketosis, the more efficient your body will become at burning fat for fuel. So during that transition, however, there can be some uncomfortable side effects, otherwise known as the keto flu. Symptoms can include things like headache, dizziness, constipation, nausea, fatigue, brain fog, and more. So this can happen really in anyone, but in individuals who have mental health conditions, we have to really consider a few extra things that may happen with them. So some potential mental health effects could be that they may have worsening anxiety, insomnia, depression, irritability, and even hypomania. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the concept of hypomania, it's basically it's a mood state that's the opposite of depression. So during this state, people can experience an elevated or agitated mood. They tend to have increased activity, rapid speech, racing thoughts, distractibility, and it's almost always associated with a decrease in sleep. So important to be monitoring sleep during that keto adaptation phase, because that can be a warning sign. So although these symptoms are usually self-limited and they resolve once you're through that period, like I said, about 2 to 4 weeks, they can certainly be troublesome to the individual and problematic for their functioning. And they also could be a barrier to the person pursuing ketogenic therapy. They may say, I'm feeling worse. I thought this was going to make me feel better. And so they may say, this isn't worth it for me. And we don't want that. So, so this is why it's really important that you work closely with your mental health care provider if you are choosing to pursue a ketogenic therapy, even if they're not familiar with ketogenic therapy for mental illness, they're going to be familiar with you and with your symptoms and what happens when you're not doing as well. And so they'll be able to assist you through that if you're experiencing any worsening symptoms during the keto adaptation period. And then also tell your family, tell whoever you're living with, so that you have an extra set of eyes on you for that additional support as well. And during this keto adaptation period, I do recommend trying to meet weekly with your mental health team if at all possible. And this is, or at least someone from your mental health team. And this is just a particularly vulnerable period, like we talked about, and you want to formulate a contingency plan with your team. So like, in what situations are we going to watch and wait? In what situations might we need to increase medication or have an as needed medication? And then in what cases are we going to abandon the diet, right? And again, this is going to be something individualized that you're going to develop with your treatment team. In addition to the mental health concerns, if you're someone who has any of the pre-existing conditions that I discussed in my special considerations video, so that's things like hypertension, diabetes, thyroid disorder, history of gout, history of kidney stones, among others, it'll also be important that you're in regular communication with your medical provider so that they can be monitoring you for these conditions and making any adjustments if needed. So particularly for people who have a history of diabetes or high blood pressure, your blood sugar levels and your blood pressure can change really early on during that keto adaptation period. And so you may need very quick adjustments to your blood pressure medications or your diabetes medications. Okay, so why do these symptoms occur? Well, when someone who is used to existing in a high insulin state because they're eating a diet that's relatively high or just objectively high in carbohydrates, when those carbohydrates are withdrawn and then you're entering into a low insulin state relatively quickly, the sodium is also going to drop, and so that's going to lead to basically your body diuresing or peeing out a bunch of fluid. And that drop in sodium causes your adrenal glands, which is a little endocrine gland that releases several hormones, including your stress hormones and aldosterone, which helps to regulate blood pressure, and it's located above the kidneys. So when you're diuresing, you're losing the sodium. The adrenal glands are then going to release things like cortisol, epinephrine, otherwise known as adrenaline, and aldosterone, which measure. So the epinephrine and the cortisol, those are stress hormones, right? And then the aldosterone, that's a hormone that helps to regulate your blood pressure. This rise in hormones is gonna lead to a rise in glutamate, which is our excitatory neurotransmitter. It basically has the entire brain activated, and that can lead to several different symptoms. So that could lead to anxiety, it could lead to insomnia, irritability, hypomania, depending on the individual and how it affects them. And in addition to those psychiatric symptoms, it could also lead to other symptoms like cravings. The stress hormones can lead to symptoms like craving things or brain fog, among other things. And then that diuresing, the loss of the fluid from the loss of the salt, that can lead to relative dehydration, and so which can lead to things like dizziness, headache, brain fog, fatigue. And so it's really important that we are hydrating, drinking plenty of fluid, as well as supplementing electrolytes, and we'll talk about that. So how do we mitigate the risk of these side effects? So let's start with that, with the electrolyte supplementation. So that is a huge component of helping someone get through the keto adaptation period. So I recommend liberally adding salt to your food, to your water, and you can buy an electrolyte supplement. So the main electrolytes we are worried about are going to be sodium, potassium, and magnesium. So if in salt, you have table salt is just sodium chloride. So one thing you could consider doing is getting Morton's light salt. That's a cheap way to do it. So I have some right here. This is Morton's light salt. And so that has sodium chloride, but it also has potassium. So the only thing you'd be missing is magnesium. And then you could also, of course, buy some electrolyte powder or something like I have one right here. This one I just got on Amazon. You can get it in bulk. It's HSA approved, so you can get it tax-free. But of course that can get a little pricey. If you buy it in bulk, it tends to be about like $1 a serving. But of course, if you're doing individual packets, it can certainly add up. If you are not using like a supplement like this that has the magnesium in it, then I would recommend getting an oral supplement. So I would recommend magnesium glycinate. That's usually what I recommend to people, taking about 200 to 400 milligrams per day. And this, I like this formulation because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. It can be helpful for insomnia as well as anxiety, which we know can be issues during this period. And it also tends to have fewer GI side effects. So like some of the other formulations like magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate certainly can cause diarrhea. But magnesium threonate is also a good option. Okay, so other behavioral strategies to help with keto adaptation symptoms are to limit stress as much as possible. So I don't recommend attempting to implement a ketogenic diet during a particularly stressful time in your life or during a transition. Just wait until you have some stability, you feel like you have the capacity to make this major life change, and then go for it. And I also recommend, under the supervision of your medical provider. I also recommend limiting exercise because this is just another stressor on your body. So it's going to increase your stress hormones even more. So if you're someone that likes to work out every day, that's amazing, but just like take it easy. Don't worry, it'll be okay if you take a couple of weeks off, and you can just sort of slowly integrate things as you're feeling better and as you're able to tolerate. So recommend you can take walks and things throughout those couple of weeks, and then start integrating some low impact recovery exercises like yoga, Pilates, or gentle swimming kind of things. And then again, you can start to exercise more as you're tolerating. But just listen to your body, okay? And it's also crucial that you prioritize sleep during the keto adaptation phase. So this will help with the management of those stress hormone levels, because we know when you're not sleeping, those stress hormone levels are going to be sky high. You might also want to consider slowly transitioning to a ketogenic diet. So like there's a few different strategies you could consider. So you could do like one meal at a time. So like just switch to a keto breakfast, get used to that, then add a lunch, get used to that, etc. Or you could, gradually decrease your carbs. So if you're eating standard American diet, which is at least 300 carbs a day, maybe cut down to 100 or 200 and then to 150, whatever works for you. But if you go really quickly from that standard American diet of 300 plus carbs per day, with consisting of a lot of refined sugars or carbs, and then you're going to 20 grams of carbs from non-starchy vegetables, you're much more likely to have keto adaptation symptoms than if you were to do so more gradually, or if you were coming from, more of like a lower carb paleo type of diet. So another thing to consider, particularly if you're on a medication like topiramate or zonisamide, like we talked about before, so these are medications that can increase your acidic state. And so we know that when you're transitioning into ketosis, because the ketones are slightly acidic, you can also become slightly acidic, and that this can increase your risk of developing kidney stones. So you can, in the beginning, consider temporarily supplementing a buffer solution, so something like baking soda. You could add a little bit of this to your electrolyte solution that you're drinking for that first 2 to 3 weeks. I've tried this. It's really unpalatable. So if anyone has figured out a way to make it more tolerable or tasty, please share your tips in the comments below. Okay, so there may be some other prescribed or over-the-counter medications that might be helpful during this keto adaptation period, and that would be something that you could discuss with your mental health provider that you're working with, and just that would be something that's individualized to you. Okay, so this was an overview of the keto adaptation period, or keto flu, and just what it is, what we can do to make it more tolerable. And please share any comments or questions below, and give me a like and follow if you enjoyed this video. And thanks so much for taking the time to listen, and I hope to see you in the next one.